Okay, I think we are live on the Dev Talk Show remote, coming from different parts of Pennsylvania and out of state, right, Rich?
Halfway
So
across the country, most of the way across the country.
most of the way across the country, we have Rich Ross, we have Andy Schwam, who I have to always
Hey.
remember not to say Andy Schwam. Andy Schwam, and then I'm Chris Gomez, and we are doing our first remote version of the Dev Talk Show where we can still all get together and have a chat about developer topics that hopefully we can educate you about and then also learn from our audience as well. So thank you for joining us tonight. We are learning to do this, so expecting some issues, but surprisingly, I think looks a little better than I thought it would maybe this weekend when we were fighting some of this and said, I don't know how we're going to pull this off.
And almost did.
Yeah, good. You did good. You figured it out.
Yeah. Now it looks like
the way I am at.
Yeah,
We
the
lost
Wi-Fi beat
Rich
up on
there for a
Rich.
minute?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi beat Rich up there for a second, but that's okay.
The beautiful hotel Wi-Fi. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, hotel Wi-Fi. We've got the three of us in different locations, but hopefully you all have a good time, whether you watch us today in September of 2019 or you watch us in the future. And if you are watching us in the future, please let us know in the comments how great things are so that when we get there, you know, we'll be happy to see what's coming. So I think tonight we were gonna jump right into kind of a broader topic, which was about how in this career we spend a lot of time learning. I think it's a pretty common refrain about, you know, always learning and continuing to see new technology emerge, and even that word new technology is a broad meaning. It could mean new software, new languages, new hardware, and just new things. And so I think there's a lot of ways that we can push this, but just to start things off, I mean, it is this is a career where new things constantly appear, but at the same time, old things change. So, and I feel like that's a whole show topic there. But number one, we'll see who wants to start this off. Just how do you keep up?
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how the sounds come through here, but I mean, it's challenging working in the Azure space, which is where I am, because it's always getting updated, always changing. So for me, it's trying to just keep on top of. There's a number of blogs that we have on the various products that we support. So whether it's looking at the Azure blogs or looking at even some of the great video services that we have and things in Channel 9 with all the cool shows that they have out there that kind of keep you up to date on what's happening. So that's one way. I know for me, that's the, you know, kind of the common things that a lot of people use is the blogs and the videos to kind of see what's happening. But
right, blogs, videos, that's a pretty common one. I mean, there's video training. There's even whole companies offering video training, a streaming style service where you pay probably a month or a year, and there's popular ones like LinkedIn Learning and Pluralsight and others where those are popular ways. So, you know, and
yeah, I heard there's a something called Mixer.
Yeah, right. The streams, right? Streamers on Mixer, on Twitch, on YouTube, people making YouTube videos, or even a show like this where we're just saying, "Hey, let's get together and learn something." But keeping up, you know, part of keeping up, I think, is making a decision as to what you're going to dive into next. Now, the interesting thing I'm curious about is how often do you make that decision? How often is it made for you? Or do you just kind of, or how often do you just say, that looks kind of fun, I think I'm going to play with it this weekend?
I think it depends on your role.
absolutely.
Okay.
So some of us get to say, here's what we're going to do. And some of us don't, right? And maybe that's not even true all the time for all the people, right? Like sometimes in my role, I get to say, here's what we're going to do. Sometimes I don't, right? And you know, I think that's true for most people, right? So it's a little bit of a mix. And I think one of the things that I've always tried to do in my career is when I get that opportunity to make that decision, I want to use it wisely, right? So take that shot. Like, should we go with the new beta thing that's cool and so I can learn it, or is it not ready yet? And be honest, there's some risk going on there, but if you make good decisions, then and you get lucky on those things, you get to make them again. If
Yeah.
you choose poorly, maybe you don't. I don't.
Right. Okay. And so at work, if you make good decisions about what to bet on, then you get to keep making them. But even like even just in a personal space, like for example, the first talk I ever gave at a Philly.net Code Camp was making games for Windows Phone using XNA. Now, I never did any of that on the job. I didn't use XNA. I didn't make games, and I didn't build anything for Windows Phone during that platform's life. But I've always kind of been interested in games, and I don't. It's not fair to say that I had a background, but it's been a hobby of mine for a long time to kind of keep up with how they're made. And I just thought it was cool, so I just did this talk. Now, was that a waste of time? What do you think?
I don't think it's. I think if you're learning something new, it's never really a waste of time. Going through that process, going through the breaking it down, and certainly and you said you gave it as a talk. So
Mhm.
if you're learning it to that level, that you have to give it as a session and try to get other people to understand it as well. You're certainly going deep enough where it puts it's a good amount of effort to get to that level of knowledge of something. So I don't even going through that for something that you may rarely use or use not in a day job kind of scenario. I think it's worth going through that because we always need to figure out different ways of learning and keeping up to speed on things.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first talk I ever gave for the Philly.net user group, and
Okay.
and I think by doing that, it gave me the confidence that I could do more. And one piece of background that I can give you is that I had come to the user group for a little while now, and you see people get up and you give talks on the current popular things at the time, and you say to yourself, well, that's covered, that person has that covered. So I kind of went way off the board, right? Like nobody's doing this. And I actually didn't, because of that, and because I'd been to Code Camp and I had seen talks like our good friend Miguel Castro explaining the IIS pipeline from beginning to end, that thing was packed. So then this Code Camp, when I came around and I said, okay, I'm going to do this XNA games for Windows Phone talk, there's going to be 3 people in here. To my surprise, it was standing room only. And so I was nervous as heck. But the key is that was my way to say, getting into community teaching, not just the community learning of going to Philly.net. Now we call them meetups. Back then,
Right.
we called them developer groups, user groups. But I think the internet sort of settled on the meetup term. There's meetups all over Philadelphia, all over the suburbs, and all over the country and the world. So, community learning, the local free community meetup, is a big value to the 3 of us.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how we all got to meet each other, to know each other, made a ton of connections. And at least for some of the things, that I've done over the course of I guess, almost 10 years of being involved with the group, actually, find different job opportunities as well, because people are, it's a way to network and not only learn, but also to be able to make connections with people.
I want to go back to what you said earlier, Chris, about I think you were trying to make the point that sometimes the thing you learn might not be something that you're going to use again after that, or something like that. You're saying, and it's like,
Sure.
and don't discount that, because learning something different, regardless of what it is, right? Like, there's so many different aspects of technology. We work with so many different frameworks, so many different ways to do things. You might be a web developer and someone says, hey, how'd you like to learn Xamarin for a couple of days? And you think, well, I'm never going to use Xamarin again. I mean, not that we wouldn't, but I'm just using that as an example, right? Because you're a web developer, right? So maybe I'm never going to do mobile again, right? But the effort and the process of learning something new is great exercise for the brain,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I don't think I don't know. I hate to say like I've never had this happen, because maybe I have, but I don't think I've ever had a situation where you didn't learn something valuable from learning something, even that you never did use again. right? Let's put it this way. I spent a lot of time learning Silverlight, and I know I don't use that again, right? But
Right.
but I
I was
learned a lot
waiting
of
for
valuable.
Silverlight to come up in this conversation.
Yeah, but I learned a lot about software development and about different paradigm. Like there's always something that you still take out of that, right? And bring into your other software development, right? And I guess maybe XAML's the one that in that case we're going back to because of my Silverlight days. But I think there's value in learning something new. Just that in itself, learning something new.
Hmm.
If you're an awesome C# developer, and you know C# inside and out, then maybe the thing is to go and learn a different language. Now, I don't spend a lot of time doing that, but I've heard people say that, by learning a different language, maybe you go learn F# or something like that. It just
Grammarly
changes your
does
perspective.
more than
Learning
catch it.
something new is powerful.
Yeah. And you can bring some of that perspective into the language that you already know. I've heard that from people who, go and learn F sharp, which is a functional language. And some of that thought process comes back to the C# object oriented side of things. So,
Yeah.
That's definitely that's one thing I've been doing, right? Is I'm not using it, but I'm very not using it on the job, but I'm definitely interested in not just F# but functional programming. And then what happens is there's something that I like from that space that makes its way into my C# coding.
Mhm.
C#, for example, one thing that that you may have heard for functional programming is the concept of immutability. And so I find that I am not changing around uh I don't know whether to call it variables, but what's really starts to happen is I start to separate objects in C# from well, this is a data object and then this is behavior. I'm not bringing them together. And that way I say, look, if I want some new, I'll just make a whole new one of the data objects. And this function is pure. If you pass in this value, you get out that value. It's not modifying anything internally. Now,
Right.
can I do that all the time? No. And part of that is because of, number one, C#'s not the functional language F# is, even though it has functional features. And number two, the libraries that we use don't work that way. But I'm bringing in something that I learned. I'm trying to bring it in. I liked that thing, so I'm trying to I try to use it even though it's totally different environment.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
And it changed your perspective on things, and that's kind of what I'm saying. There's always something you gain from that. Even if you never wrote F# again.
Right.
Not that I'm not saying you shouldn't. Actually, I'd like to spend some time on it. Maybe that would be something we should. How many times have we said that? There's a topic for this show.
I think so. And I mean, it's one that I kind of been squirreling under the covers. Say, okay, when are we going to be ready to do something meaningful there? But no,
it doesn't have to be that meaningful. Maybe we just start hacking at it and see what we figure out. If you know a bit of it, teach me. Teach me to just getting started. Intro to simple something.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about meetups and community, and then just the value of. So you said it a little bit earlier, Andy. Is here we are on Mixer and Twitch and YouTube. There's a chance that streams are the next wave. Our good friend Jeff Fritz has recruited the whole band of live coders on Twitch, which has been a fantastic accomplishment for him, and he's doing awesome things there. He has a great audience, and he's using that not just to teach. I mean, certainly, I think your typical viewer goes there figuring you're going to learn something, but he's also looking to his longtime viewers to help him. Especially if it's an area that this one viewer maybe is a data expert, and so he gets a little bit of assistance on his data infrastructure, whether it's whatever he's going to use. And he says, yeah, I kind of know this stuff, but wow, this viewer knows it a lot better. So he calls it pair programming in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
So is that the next wave? Is that the next meetup?
Well, I actually was actually watching his show today. And it's kind of ironic because I've probably only watched his show 2-3 times in the year. I don't know how long he's been doing this.
Almost 2 years, right?
Almost 2 years now, right? I've only watched it 2-3 times, and that's mostly a timing thing. It's not his fault. It's
Right.
just I'm
It's
not
the
always
middle of the
available when.
workday for me, so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but here's what I noticed from his show. Okay, he he's teaching, he's learning, like you said, at the same time, both those things. But there's a lot more subtlety going on that show,
Mhm.
and it's hard to believe. But so I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna go to both sides of this for a minute and say,
Okay.
when we have the user group meetings, which now are called meetups, as Chris said, there was time when we used to, we'd hang out in between the sessions. A bunch of people would go out for drinks afterwards, and we would socialize when we're eating. We're getting to know each other. We're networking. We're building our networks, and we're having fun and learning, and all the other stuff that goes along with going to a user group meeting. The opposite side of that is I could make a video, be it on a system like Pluralsight, or maybe it's just a YouTube video, and I could do that, and it's very isolated.
Yeah.
Might be me or someone else speaking to an audience,
Right.
and there's a lot of value in that, right? And again, there's value in all these things, but what you see on somebody like Jeff's show is the interaction. What's really happening there is the word community.
Right.
He has built a community, like you said, these live coders that I wasn't really that familiar with that whole thing until now. That he's got his like posse or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, I'm looking at his show today. I mean, he had 120 people tuned in at the time I was doing it. That's only a mere portion of the followers he has. At the time I was on, I noticed 120 people, but the people are chatting with each other.
Yeah.
They're chatting with him. God knows how he manages the whole stream. The chat's going, and he's got sound effects and all that. But take that all away. At the root of the outcome of all that is not just learning, but community. And I
Yeah.
found it fascinating.
Yep. Yep. It might be a wider reaching user group, but in a strange sense, today, the communities at a popular user group and a popular coding stream might be similar in size, but you figure that the upside online is literally limitless. There's no reason 10,000 people can't be watching. There's no reason 100,000 people can't be watching, and only so many people can fit into the MPR at the Malvern MTC. There's an upper limit to physical meetups. So things like YouTube, and part of what I think inspired us even to start this show is the idea that you can reach people that can't be in your physical space, and you can even reach people that can't be in your physical time. Because with the YouTube archive, watch it whenever. So an interesting way to learn by coding in front of other folks. He's learning, and so are the people watching and contributing. So,
And
it's go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a little different than it's just think about normal commercial consumption of entertainment. And this is, some of it's entertainment because Jeff, the way he communicates and does the community aspect of it and does the sound effects and all the cool things that they do there, it is a portion of entertainment, but it's also learning. But we've gone, I don't know, the last 15, 20 years, that TiVo society, we can watch anything anytime we want. We didn't have appointment television anymore. And we've kind of come back around to it. We have, with Jeff Stream and his community, he's got appointment, and he's not the only one. The rest of the coders are the same way to get that kind of engagement.
Us, by the way.
Yeah.
We're
Wednesday
trying.
nights, 8:30, right? Eastern time.
Yeah.
Be there.
Did we lose Rich?
Well, the Wi-Fi did freeze on Rich a little bit
might
there.
be frozen. But I think what he's saying there is that you're back. Yeah, I think what you're saying there is that while there's great value in watching the archives on YouTube and things like that, there's more value in being there live. And so because of the interaction, and so he's bringing that, him and other people like him, I mean, he's certainly not the only one, but are bringing that back into saying there is an appointment. There's a value in being there for the appointment.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's cool.
Absolutely.
It's a good point. Yeah.
So
I'm only
far,
repeating what you said.
We've talked a lot about learning learning in a community. So that could be community meetups, conferences. Now we're extending that to videos and streams and even a show like this. So that's learning together. There's other ways to learn. And earlier I heard somebody say blogs. And so that's the written word, right? So how much of the learning today, how much learning today do you get from the written word? Let's say today, and then you can we'll think a little bit about the past in a second. But right now, is that becoming more 50-50, or do you still overwhelmingly look to written sources of learning? Either one of you.
Rich, you want me to take it? Yeah. So
Yeah, go for
I
it.
think for me, it depends on the type of learning I'm doing. So, for instance, I'm at work, I'm stuck on a problem, and I need to get a solution. To me, I'm looking for blogs and stuff like that because in a blog, you'll see things written out. Step A, step B, step C. You could follow it along. There's a screenshot. I don't have to hit pause, when someone's talking. The flip side of that is if I want to learn something new that I've not done, it's a little less of a detail thing, but I want that overview or I want to see things, then I like, audio, I like podcasts, and I like video for that kind of stuff. And it's a different level of engagement, but I don't like to have to watch and pause and do things and pause and do things. So that's where a blog I find very helpful in those cases.
Right. So, real quick, we did get on YouTube, right? And the reason I asked
checked
that,
right now.
Yeah, is because I did not get in the habit of clicking the start recording button. So as long as we got on YouTube, we're all right, because I don't know if we have our Mixer or Twitch stream set up to.
Well, I can check right now. But last time I saw, when I looked earlier, I don't know if I did put a note in our private chat to each other that I do think we are on YouTube, but I'm going to go in there right now and double check and see where.
And
So
Mixer does keep.
We do have that VOD setting turned on for Mixer, okay? Because I just didn't remember. I know you can turn that off. In fact, if you don't want VOD saved, but I do think the default is that they are saved. So there's something, while Andy's looking that up, we're talking about the written word, like looking at blogs, which are often short form. I guess they can be longer. Sometimes they can be series. You might think of it more like maybe a magazine article. So like, rest in peace, MSDN magazine, way of learning something. But what about these? This happens to be inside SQL Server 2005. This was a 2-part series that taught me the most about writing quality T-SQL and just thinking about database problems. I still keep these 2 books, even though I probably haven't cracked them open in many years. But there have been those years where one day somebody says, we're trying to do something in SQL and it's so slow. And why are they doing it that way? Because they're not thinking like a database developer. They're thinking like us C developers, if then else. And what ends up happening is I say, I remember that was addressed specifically in this book. And so I crack it open. And this has been years now. It's been years. But I said this is from 2005. And I still hang on to these just because it saved me so many times in maybe, when I say the last 15 years, you got to blank out the last 5 or 6.
Right.
But, there are still a few of these gems that I've got. Now, do I buy them anymore? I don't think so. I think it's been a very long time. But it was how I learned. Here's this one: 3D game programming with DirectX 11. Why?
Yeah, it was
because I thought it would be cool.
It was definitely the way we learned.
Yeah.
Right.
This one has a CD in the back, which would mean that I would have to have a CD-ROM or DVD-ROM player in a computer in order to make use of said CD.
You know what you gotta do? You gotta get one of these. I bought one of these recently. Portable CD DVD player.
But what do you do with it? Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I needed to get some music, off topic. I needed to get some music. I had CDs. I have all these CDs, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to rip one of those CDs. And I go over to all my devices, and I'm like, oh my God, I do not have a single thing. So these things are cheap, by the way. Just as a plug, I think it was like $25 or something like that.
So this is a classic, Effective C++, Scott Myers. This is a classic. Now, if you're under 25, this was a classic before you were born. But I did use this. Now, I probably haven't used it since the 90s, but I used it. So books were a thing. Books were a thing. Long. I mean, did you used to go to the bookstore and look at the computer books? Because I did.
Yeah.
But that's gone now, right? Is it blogs and documentation maybe? Because documentation's improved. It's not just reference material anymore.
Let me just tell you another story about books, right?
Yeah.
How psyched were you when you went to a user group meeting and at the end they said, hey,
yes.
we've got a book we're giving away.
Right.
Or, and you're like, yeah, I got the book. Like, you were psyched, right? Because they weren't cheap. They were some of these books, $45, $50, maybe more. I think I remember some of the prices on some of these things.
Yeah.
But I think there's value in that. Listen, reading can be a great way to learn. And I think there's value in books, especially when they're like those kind of long form theoretical type things, where like, sort of better software development and like architecture pattern, like where you want to get into like long sort of discussion, even though it's not a two-way discussion. Other than that, I think the books are in trouble.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, when you look at how MSDN magazine went away, right? And a lot of the books that used to be published by, on the topic have given way to instead a push for more high quality documentation. Like docs.microsoft.com is not what it was before, a reference site. It is kind of like a book, but the longest form book you could possibly write, covering every topic. And it presents it in an article based way, but then there's the reference and then there's the samples. And before you used to go buy a book for that, but now you just go there. And I'm picking on docs.microsoft.com, but they're not the only folks like this. You can go to the Docker docs, you can go to Java docs. They're not just places to go look up what's in the standard C library from back in the day. It's no. You also come here to learn.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the Microsoft Press books that there were.
Yeah, no, I remember. I'm cutting in for Rich there, but yeah, I remember Microsoft Press books, right? I had one right here that I was looking at. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Docs is that place where you can have that, and it becomes not only a living document or a living book, in that you can do updates to it, but the community can do the updates to it.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. So Docs house samples. How much learning have you done from samples and maybe taking apart code? Does that help? Or has it?
Definitely.
Or is it better? Is it better now than it was? I think today samples are more ready to run than they used to be.
I think that's true. I think it's easier. It's whether it's easier because of the types of things we're trying to run in samples, or because of things. What you have to install on your machine is kind of different nowadays for some of those things to work, depending on what it is you're trying to build, at least for the things that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So it becomes a little easier that way. So yeah, I think samples certainly are another way of learning. You can, step through it, pull things apart, see how it runs. But I think, the fact that I can get a sample and I have my choice of samples, even to the point of, hey, I want to do this bit of functionality, I'm going to go ahead and just pull down the sample and see how it runs.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think samples have come a long way. So taking the old example back to books, I remember sitting with the book opened up in front of me,
that's what I was
and
just
then
gonna say.
typing in a whole class of things, right? And eventually the books got CDs in the back, and it was a little better, but that's the way it started. But take now to your modern code sample, where the sample's often in like an executable window, like on a website, where you can change it, you can make changes live. I mean, the first big use of that was all what was that one called for JavaScript?
Well, like JS Fiddle was
Yeah, yeah.
one,
Thank you. Like
right? But there's
fiddles and
lots of
things
them,
like
right?
that.
There's
Right.
all kinds of
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
try.net,
And
there's
right.
all
And I
kinds
was
of
going to say now you have try.net
yeah.
and you have other sort of like REPL type things, and it's really interesting. It's just a different. It's just come a long way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. So interactive samples where we're very close. In fact, we're probably kind of at this point where it's not just here's a sample code, and sure you could go copy it and build the sample yourself or clone it from Git, but no, just start working with it right here. Like in Azure Cloud Shell
Yeah.
is another example. Just Microsoft Learn. Just you know what? Not only do we have a tutorial for you to walk through, we're actually going to set up real live Azure resources that are time limited that so that you can follow, like you can do it. You can do it. It's not even theoretical. Just go for it. Go ahead and do it. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so learning from interactivity is it's I'd say it's here. We're like on the cusp, I think, of a huge wave there. So that's more encouragement to play, right? Just try things out for yourself. When do you stop? I read something once, and I'm not going to say that I agree with the statement, but it stuck with me, and it's going to be terrible because I'll never remember the author who actually said, "Don't don't uh, don't do tutorials." It was like you can read the tutorial, but don't follow along with it. Start building your project. That was just the advice because the thinking was is that you go to you go to a blog and you follow the tutorial along and you re-implement it. Then you say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So you go do another one and you go do another one and you go do another one. You're not solving your problem. You're just kind of learning what maybe your abstract problems or maybe your somebody else's problem. I don't know. I thought the advice might have been a little extreme, but when do you at some point you just have to jump in and say the way I'm going to learn is I'm going to solve a problem of importance to me, and it doesn't have to be work. It could be. So
Yeah, that's an extreme statement. I agree with you, but I think the basis of it makes sense, right? Like where it's coming from makes sense. And I mean, from a similar angle, slightly different context. Um, I've had numerous experiences where I'm writing, or I supply some code for projects where it's sort of like this base level, core level stuff where it's like maybe the repository level or some kind of other data access thing, and um, and people will use that code, but they don't really fully understand it.
okay.
And I say, what you need to do is, open up another window, right, and rewrite what I did your own way, right? Do it again. Because people come in with this question. Well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done it this way. Wouldn't it be more efficient to try this? And I love that kind of feedback, right? But sometimes my answer is, well, why don't you go ahead, and I'm not in a bad way, but go ahead and write it yourself, and you'll see where the problems are. You'll see like what the idiosyncrasies are. Again, I think what the advice was is if you just followed the tutorial, again, it's a different circumstance, but if you just followed the tutorial, you're only seeing it from that one perspective of the one way that the author prepared it for you, right? Without mistakes and without like all the options and the things you might want to try and play around in your own playground, right? And so that's why I say, rewrite that library yourself sometimes, and learn how it really works and learn what the pros and cons are and things like that. I don't know. It seems similar to me.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Maybe not.
Um. So if you're gonna learn something and work on something, how do you invent that sample or that project or um deciding what am I going to do with this? Is it something you do personally, or again, it could be for work? Um, I guess for work is the easy one. If you're researching something because you've already got a pretty good beat on it being useful for work, that's easy. But if I just said, well, like for example, I can give you the X and A example, is I then had to think of what what am I going to demonstrate? And am I going to be happy if it's just like a ball bouncing around? Or do I want to pick a game and try to at least implement enough of that game functionality that it feels like I accomplished something? I mean, I set the bar pretty high in that talk. I actually wanted it to feel like you could play the game. Now, was it complete? It didn't have menus, and it didn't. And oh, you know, the main character in the game could not actually be defeated. But the implementation was there. Basically, it was a re-implement, similar to a Breakout style game. Which, if you haven't heard of Breakout, that's an easy one to Google. But similar to that. So the character was being bounced up to hit balloons up at the top. Now, if the character in Breakout, when you missed the ball with the paddle, you lost. I didn't implement that, but I implement all the rest, so it kind of felt functional. But I made that up out of my head. That's not really true. What I said is I'm going to re-implement a game called Circus Atari for the Atari 2600. That's what I really did. But even less people are going to know what Circus Atari is than Breakout. So that was for the game. That was one thing. To give you another example, let's say I want to learn Azure Functions, or we talked about earlier F#. It's like, okay, so what should I do? And that's always been a sticking point for me on some technologies for years. Like years will go by and I'll go, I'm not sure what I should do.
Rich? You're getting ready to talk. No, okay.
No, go ahead.
I stumped it. I stumped the panel. Go ahead.
No. I have. So what I used to have this standard thing, and I'm not alone. I've seen this. I don't know, books. Back in the day, it used to be catalog all the CDs in your library, right? It's kind of funny because I was just talking about CD burner, but I used to be like, anytime I wanted to learn, like if it was database thing, I'd put CDs in the case, right? CDs in the database. If it was a UI, I'd build a UI to edit. And the point is, I knew what the business logic was supposed to be for this simple example, and I recreated it many, many times in different languages and different platforms and things like that. So I don't know if that's like an example, Chris, like what you mean, but like I gotta plug something in here. Something's dying on me here. But that's the kind of thing that I would do to sort of get myself up and going with it.
Okay, so by the way, here's Circus Atari.
No, you found it.
Yeah, that's the original Atari 2600 version.
Oh, that's the original version. Yeah, I remember this game. I mean, I totally remember this game.
And
I remember being excited to play it.
Oh gosh, so when I was back with my Atari 2600 over the summer, I did play this again. But in any case, yeah, I don't have. It's the only thing that would be better is if I could bring up the XNA based game right now that I made, but I can't actually do that. So in any case, yeah, that was the idea. So the CD, I get what you're saying though. The CD organizer, it's the kind of thing where if a new framework came out, you could implement the CD organizer. A new web framework, or even just moving to the web from desktop, or Silverlight came out and you said, I'm going to make the CD organizer, or even heck, you get a new data access tool, going from SQL to MySQL. You can say, well, I wonder how I would do the data for the CD organizer that way.
Right.
That's an interesting, I've never had that common project. So I like that. I like that approach.
Well, I will say that it's funny, like, you sort of triggered that memory in me. I don't, I haven't done it in a while, but it used to be my go-to. Like for many years, it was.
No, I understand,
it was my go-to.
and I think there's value in that. Is having that go-to project, the problem you want to solve every time, right?
And again, because when you're trying to learn that technology, what you don't want to be thinking about is what are the business rules. Like you get caught up in like, well, what should I build? Well, how should it? That's not the point. The point is to have fun, start hacking at something, and get into it. I usually give the advice. It's funny because I think maybe I was in opposition or somewhat in opposition to what you were saying earlier. I don't like, if I'm at work and I'm going to learn something new, I don't like to solve a business problem with it.
Okay.
In my early stages, of course, I want to solve a business problem with it in the long run, right? But like if I have one of these things where I say I'm going to spend like a couple days learning something new, I try to keep it away from work, because work is too real, and I find myself getting caught up in the details where I shouldn't be caught up in the details. And this is sort of just my way of thinking, and maybe it's just my brain versus other people's, but this is advice I've given other people as well. It's like if I'm solving something for a work, then I get so caught up in the real rules, like, well, um, it's insurance, right? So like, oh well, the policy has to have this and doesn't have to have that, and I'm like, then I stop and think, well, wait, stop, man, who cares? Like that doesn't matter. That's not what I'm trying to do here, right? It's just a pretend policy or something like that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sure.
why work with that real thing where I can try to I can I can go to just sort of like that CD library or so, whatever it is, just some fun thing. By the way, I don't know if you
Yeah. It
realize
looks like
Rich
we
Rich
lost Rich
dropped his
there.
video.
Yeah.
He put in the chat here. He's going to go with no video. Hopefully he can still hear us and he's
Oh, okay.
I
speaking.
still got you. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
he
Good.
was
Hopefully that
having
helps.
bandwidth issues and wanted to just be
Just
in the
audio.
conversation and just have audio, and he thought he would try it out. This is an experiment. Let's go back on that. This day, talk about learning something new. Learning
Right.
something new, right? We're learning something new by trying to do this outside of the MTC, outside of the studio. I spent like 2 days trying to get this thing to work,
Yeah.
and had problems. And Chris came up with some pretty good hacks. Rich is out in a hotel room on the Wi-Fi. I mean, but
Right.
it would be nice if we could get this perfected a little bit so that
There we
certainly
go.
on bad inclement weather days or whatever it is, we can
Yeah.
keep this show running and
Yep.
stuff like that. And
And as you can see,
I
I
don't.
played with the scene live there, so you can all
I
see
saw
that.
you moving things around. Yeah, I saw you moving me. That's cool.
But no, that's fine. So yeah, I mean, these were some of the another bullet point that I threw down here thinking about, because I haven't done this, is could you learn by working on open source projects? A very modern way to learn and play with code. Um, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm super successful at that. I've contributed to documentation of some open source projects, and the way that I end up contributing. So I do think this is related. Is this is pretty common. Is I will be reading the make your first app that connects to Azure AD with OpenID Connect. Like I'm doing that sample, and so I do the sample. And as I'm doing the sample, one of two things. I either find the language, the prose, to be a little unclear, or flat out typos, or sometimes the sample is wrong, or there's a bug, or it turns out that the API for the service has moved on a little bit, and maybe the name of a method has changed, or the name of a something. And so I found that I've made quite a few contributions just simply by saying, okay, I'm going to consume this sample, this tutorial, and along the way, either improve or fix it. And that's been an interesting way to kind of not just learn, but at the same time give back some mastery of the topic. Like, oh, it turns out your API changed here, and you just haven't gotten around to updating your sample. So here's my pull request.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah. I think those are.
Go ahead, Rich. Yeah.
Yeah, much like doing any kind of a anything you can do to see how others write code, because that's kind of what you're doing by picking up one of those open source projects as well. It gives you a chance to learn a little bit just from how somebody else might structure or think about solving a problem. So, and then you have to figure out to put your fix inside of that matches into how they've kind of architected that bit of a solution. So I think it's just another facet of learning, and going beyond just working on something yourself and working in something in collaboration. It's a different set of skills.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just something I was trying to think. It was easy to come up with bullet points about how we learn, and so I tried to think a little outside the box. I said, well, gosh, here in the here in 2019, with the rise of open source and source code being live, can we learn that way by saying, hey, I'm going to go help out with this project, and tried to think of maybe how I've done that. So it's that might be a new wrinkle that's certainly a long way away from these. So we've got a couple minutes, I think, before we head towards wrapping up here. And the last thing, which I actually think that this could be a whole show. So I don't know that we need to dive in, but we've talked a lot about how we're learning. And I've heard a lot of times, we talked a little bit about community, but even the learning that we're doing on our own. And so what I think might be intimidating to somebody watching this, if you're watching now, you say, well, gosh, how easy for you. It sounds like you have a lot of years of expertise, and so you can just pick up some documentation and get it done, and boom, now you're an expert in something. We did talk a little bit about how sometimes when we typed in those samples and they didn't, I can think of times where I typed in those samples and I never got it working, ever. I just gave up.
Yeah.
Because there was no other way. I couldn't clone it from Git. I couldn't copy it off the CD. It just never happened for me. So how today in 2019, you're trying to learn something, you're trying to do something, it doesn't work. How do you get help?
Stack.
Yeah.
Stack
That's
Overflow.
that's the first place.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I hit Google. Sometimes I don't usually go direct to Stack. I usually Google and go broad. But interestingly, sometimes if that doesn't work, I go to Stack. I will find something that for some reason didn't come up on Google, which I find interesting.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there's of course other ways after that.
Yeah. So one that worked for me once is I was using I'm not going to remember the name of the package, but there was this little gap for a few years in between of where ASP.NET's identity stuff worked and where at least some of the experts thought it should be. And when I say experts, I mean like Dominic Baer and Brock Allen, who have the identity server project, right? They're pretty giants in the space. And so Brock Allen wrote he wrote a little NuGet package, and I'm not going to remember the name right now. And when I had trouble using it, I reached out to him and he said, let's get on a Skype call.
Wow.
And this was about 4 years ago, but still it was in an era where this was possible. If I wanted help with the first computer game programming book I ever read, which was called Action Arcade Adventure Set by Diana Gruber, I didn't have an easy way to get in touch with her. 10 years later, I met her at a convention, but by then I didn't need help anymore. Like I'd already beaten my head against the wall.
Where were you when I needed you?
Tried to implement the book. But at the time, I didn't even know, like, what do you do? This was kind of BBS era. So, what do you do? You might hear that she frequents a BBS in Massachusetts. Well, I was kind of young to be doing long distance phone call BBSs. But today we can get mentorship, right? We can get help, maybe even from the developer or expert who might have built the sample or tutorial or project. So I think that's cool. I think that's a modern thing that we didn't necessarily have.
So I think it goes back to, it sort of ties back to some of the things we said earlier, I think, which is that we've modernized things now. We have a lot of technology that helps us connect with different people. And what we need is a community of people to help us, right? And so your community, I mean, the way you got help with Brock, right? You said Brock Allen.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that he was willing to be a part of your community, and it's easy because of technology. Now, I don't know if it's because you know him, or you had a connection, that you were able to listen. Not everybody can help everybody, right?
No, I didn't know him at all. I literally just
so
got
but what I'm
reached out
saying
and
is
said, hey, let's have a Skype call.
Yeah, and so because of technology, our community is bigger than it used to be, right? And people should participate in that community, and the community is there for you when you need it, hopefully, right? In the circumstance that comes up, hopefully someone's going to help out. It's just it's big,
Right.
I mean, you could tweet right at certain people. You could post questions on people's repos. You can post questions in Stack. You can tweet out at companies. How often have you see people tweet at even at a whole company? They don't know who the person is. They say, "Hey, Acme Widget Factory, I'm stuck on something," and they'll say, "All right, DM us, right?" Or
Hmm.
whatever it is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That kind of access is, in the grand scheme, it's unprecedented, although it's getting more, now it just kind of feels natural.
Right.
If I'm having trouble with, something in ASP.NET, maybe I'll just tweet at the developer who on the team who gave the talk gives the talk next week at .NET Conf, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you
Or-
all don't mind, I mean, go ahead, Rich.
No, it's just along that same lines. Instead of just the general person, you get that broadcast message of just with the hashtag, somebody out there,
Sure.
the wisdom of the
Yeah.
community as well. So
Yeah, actually, that happened very recently. We were talking on our show about whether a specific preview could be thought of, like, are they going to do a release candidate of .NET Core, which they did,
Mhm.
.NET Core 3. But I said that on the show, and so I saw Scott Hunter tweet out a new preview, and so without doing any research or reading any release notes, and you can tell how sheepishly I felt after, I went ahead and just tweeted, and I said, so hey, is there going to be a release candidate that we can go live with? And so I'm pretty sure, gosh, I want to say it was Ben Adams, who is another pretty big name, but I could be wrong. I have to go look at the tweet. Responded to me and said, and he wasn't trying to be critical. He just said, like, yes, they do have go live for this release. And I said, wow. And I went and looked at the release notes, and sure enough, there it was. And so, but that feeling that I could reach directly back out to the director of .NET and just say,
Mhm.
well, heck, maybe he'll answer for me real quick. That's not something that I would have felt along. Like, I wouldn't have felt I could have asked Bill Gates maybe for help with QBasic or Visual Basic or something. So times have changed.
Yeah. And you mentioned you briefly sort of mentioned .NET Conf, which is kind of a good segue as well. And we're talking about how do we learn, and you said, oh, you could just tweet at the person who's going to be speaking at .NET Conf. What a great lineup they have. 4 days out from now.
Yeah,
.NET Conf.
Monday, right? And .NET Core 3 launches, and that's big news for this show. Because I think that that we're gonna probably doing a lot more work in .NET Core 3 topics. So
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
I'm looking at the list of speakers for the .NET Conf. I'm on their website now. I'm just scrolling through this. I see Kathleen Dollard's going to talk, Dan Roth, Maria Nagaga. Of course, you got Scott Hunter and Hanselman.
I think Carrie
Matt
Payette streams quite a
Torgensen.
bit. So yeah, there's Go
What's
ahead.
that?
Carrie Payette, I think, has done some streaming.
I haven't seen her name on this thing yet, but Kendra
Go ahead.
Havens from she's a program manager. We've seen her speak
Yep.
before. She's great. Who's this guy? Louis Beltran. I don't know if I know him, but there's a lot of people. The cool thing about a conference like this, you're going to see people people you don't know, all over the magic of just the internet, free. There you go.
Yeah, it's
Very
going to be
impressive.
great. Monday's going to be big. That's a pretty big day on the .NET calendar there. So
Yeah. Now Monday, of course, unfortunate for me. What was that? I hear something beeping. Somebody's audio going. I'm going to be in Las Vegas Monday. Is that my audio? I hear something beeping. Is that my headset dying? Maybe. Oh God.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You don't hear it
here.
beeping, do you? No.
Nope.
I'll plug my headset in and see if that solves the problem. Oh yeah. Big red light.
So yeah, that's why it explains why you heard it, and we said we don't hear anything.
I tried to show you guys the red light. You see that?
We said
the red light on my headset says it's going dead.
Almost made it to the end of the show.
Yeah.
I think the show was a good experiment. I think this is working out pretty well, by the way.
Yeah, there's some things we got to figure out. I think maybe the screen sharing and coding and stuff, but we'll get it. We'll get it. This is going to be a good chance for us to use some technologies like live share, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And a place with a better bandwidth.
Yeah, but you know what?
Rich,
I'm glad that you were able to join us, Rich, and that we were able to keep it going. So that's good. In the past, we just wouldn't do the show. So this is a good
Right. Yeah.
way to keep moving. So we do.
And if
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if bandwidth is the only issue,
Yeah.
then at least we can be comfortable that we can at least do this from home at least. So.
Right. So the last thing we'll do, I think, is we've had the informal, what are we watching, what are we doing segment, and what's kind of nice about this, Andy and Rich have no idea, so let's see. I'm curious what they think. So I came up with something quite literally about an hour and a half ago. This is Casey Miraturi, who is a game developer of legend, really. He's done game technology R&D. I challenge you to find a modern game, a AAA title that isn't using the Bink video library. Go start up Gears 5 and you'll see the Bink logo. So he decided 4+ years ago, he decided that he would document for all time the techniques that it takes to make a game from scratch, a modern game from scratch. Not Unity, not Unreal Engine, and not that there's anything wrong with those engines, but what were the old ways? How did we do these things? And so he started this in 2014, I'm pretty sure. Am I right about that? Yes, he started it in 2014. So we're 5 years into this, just about. And here, this happens to be day 3 of what was called Handmade Hero, where he codes a complete game from scratch. And here on day 3, he is still dealing with the beginnings of the Windows message loop in C++. Does that ring bells for any of us? And I took a look at his episode list. It's been a while since I've checked it out. But even 2 or 3 years ago, I started watching the series, the back episodes. But if I scroll all the way to the end, 553 episodes in, I find it astounding that it's still going on working on this game, and teaching everybody how to do these modern topics with like SIMD, raycast, voxelizing light probes. I'm not even sure what that means. But if we go back to day 1, which was setting up his build, the way he likes to set up the build, opening a Win32 window, these were things that rang a bell. And so what did I do? I followed along and I said, how could I re-implement what he's doing? Now, this is the end of day 2, so it's not super exciting. All that happens is he's just getting the message pump working. I'm not even sure if it ran, or did I have an error? Oh, it exited. Okay, so I guess I've got something wrong here. But earlier it was working, and this was a lot of really going back in time. A lot of folks never wrote this code that actually calls into WinMain, your own WinMain and your own message pump. I wouldn't be surprised if the two of you here didn't. Maybe if you did, if you started off in MFC land or Visual Basic land, I wouldn't be shocked if you said, no, I never did this. So the question is like, well, then why the heck did you ever do it? Because back in the 1995 timeframe, this is how you'd write your game. You would start, you'd do it in C. You could use C++, but in general, you couldn't use MFC. That wasn't going to work for you. So you were in the Win32 API. So a lot of this was familiar to me. And so I just started following along and implementing it with him. What was interesting, though, for me is that he specifically set out to use a different editor, Emacs. He uses Visual Studio to compile, and he does not use like a project file or a solution. He calls the compiler at the command line. Now, even though I could have followed along with what he did, that would have been fine. I said, yeah, but I'm kind of a Visual Studio developer, so how would I do this in Visual Studio? So I actually did. There were a few places where, and guess what I went? I went to Google, and sometimes I found the answer on Stack Overflow, where in order to do what he was doing in his command line build, I went to project properties and I kind of found some of those same things. For example, if you were to make a C++ program today, file new project, you're going to get a Unicode program. He wasn't using Unicode, so I had to turn that off if I wanted the code to be exactly the same. I actually couldn't figure that out at first, so I just went ahead and built it with Unicode until I said, gosh, I want to figure out what is it that Casey's doing. Why can't I go back to ANSI? Where is that setting? And there it was. There was also doing some things in the C++. Where else was I? I think it was... I'm not sure if I'm going to remember everything. There were some things in here, though, that I turned on and off. One of them is I had to turn on the Windows subsystem, which he does not do. He links directly to things like user32 DLL. I kind of thought, I said, I still think the modern Visual Studio developer probably wouldn't use that setting. So for now, I've been experimenting with like trying to figure out like how would the C++. I wish I could have found it, but that's okay. It's not that big a deal. And then of course, each step of the way, I said, okay, well, I'll save it in a Git repo. Now, I'm not publishing the Git repo because I think that's a little unfair to him and his project. Part of his projects, part of the goal of the stream is you can buy Handmade Hero today. You can pre-order it. It's been available for pre-order for 5 years now. And you'll get the game when it's finished, but you also get the day-by-day source code. So I feel like since that's a service that he's offering, I'm not going to take my re-implementation and put it on GitHub publicly or anything like that. But at least from my point of view, I can say, okay, where was the end of day 1? Where was the end of day 2? Where was the end of day 3? I don't know how far I'll get, but it made me reminisce again about Win32. Wow, I did in a long time, and kind of fun to be. I mean, fun to a certain level of fun, I guess.
Right.
To be filling out window class structs again, and thinking about when you're going to delete the memory that's being pointed to by something. So that was what I'm watching, and handmadehero.org, and you can start watching yourself, and maybe try learning the old classic ways of building a game.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool.
So I think we've been about an hour, right? Maybe about an hour, just a little over an hour live, and
pretty close.
So I think we had a good talk about learning, and then hopefully a little interesting. Check out handmadehero.org, and then this should pave the way for us to be here next Wednesday, 8:30. We'll be back live. I'm not sure if Rich and I will be in the studio, but we're going to try to bring Andy in remote, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I got to see how the time works. Interestingly, Rich is in Las Vegas. I will be in Las Vegas next week for a conference. And let's see. So at 8:30.
I guess
so
that
it's
would
like
be 5:30. Yeah.
5:30 there. That might actually work out pretty well if I can get back to the hotel and try it out. Otherwise, you guys will be on your own, which I think you can handle pretty well.
Yeah. Well, let us know. But
Definitely.
But yeah, thanks for all of the input on the topics. We tried to come up with a cohesive thing to talk about tonight instead of just rambling on for an hour. So I think that went pretty well. And let us know what you think if you're watching us. If you joined us tonight on Mixer or Twitch, thank you. And if you're watching us in the future on YouTube, let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you like the show, go ahead and click the little thumbs up so we know what kind of topics you like. And if you like what we're doing here, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when new videos hit YouTube. And you can also pay attention to the channel because the live stream schedule gets posted there too. So I think next week, I think what I have to do is I think we have to commit to the show being the official launch of the Dev Talk Show website on a real live internet domain name URL that people can actually get to.
What?
Yeah, that has
really?
to. I think that has to happen next Wednesday. Yeah, for real.
Oh man, that would be awesome. We built it.
Yeah, it just hasn't been linked up to anything. So I think that has to happen next Wednesday. So
that'd be cool.
In any
Yeah.
case, so I've committed to that now. So we'll do that next Wednesday on the show. We get Rich and Andy, we can go live with it. So in any case, anything else, Rich or Andy?
I'm good. I think this was fun.
All right.
Yeah, good show.
All right. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for watching. And again, join us next time or watch more videos right here with the three of us. And so for Rich and Andy, this is Chris Gomez, and thank you for watching the Dev Talk Show.